All right. So my creed begins with this quote from Vonnegut. Hello, babies. Welcome to Earth. It's hot in the summer and cold in the winter. It's round and wet and crowded. On the outside, babies, you've got 100 years here. There's only one rule that I know of, babies. God damn it, you've got to be kind. So I really like Vonnegut because he sounds basically a lot like my grandfather. They're both World War II vets, and they just had a similar frank vocabulary. And yeah, I mean, more or less, that's what I've arrived at here at 36 years old. So I'll tell you kind of how I got there. I come from, like, for lack of a better term, some weird people. I mean, that grandfather I mentioned was an atheist, which is just really uncommon for baby boomers. His wife was a nurse, and I recently unearthed a picture of my grandma in the early 1930s wearing a short skirt, posing like a supermodel on top of a car she'd bought herself with her nurse money. And also, like, she drove herself around, so she was kind of a radical. So I just kind of have a lot of outside influences that are sort of outside the mainstream. I say I'm a dad in training because I'm still getting used to this father thing. I was never around little kids growing up, and I was the youngest in my family. A survivor, I'll get to that. A teacher, because I think that's an important part of my identity and who I am. And I consider myself an absurdist and a humanist, which I'll talk a bit more about later. This is a poem I wrote when I was about 20 or so, and this is published on actually Orson Scott Card's website, the guy who wrote Ender's Game. And I put this here because poetry is just a massive influence on me, and as long as I can remember, I've enjoyed reading it and writing it. So I have to kind of remember that for myself. And I'm also putting this here to remind myself that, oh, I can actually write well. Like, I can do poetry. I'm able to not just consume it, but create it. And I'll explain why I'm reminding myself of that later. So my first string of influences here is just all these dead thinkers. I think it's really amazing that writing allows me to basically do this mind meld with these ancient thinkers, some not so ancient, and learn all these things from people who had, decades to think through life. So there's no particular order here. I'm not going to talk about all of them, but I've just gotten lessons from so many people. Vonnegut's a big influence on me with the absurdist humanist stuff. He really kind of arrives at the conclusion that life is incredibly unfair and just basically out of our control most of the time. So given that, why not try to be nice to the people around you? And that's pretty much where he ends up. Guys like Buddha, who figured out that a lot of our suffering just comes from wanting things and that we can choose to give that up, etc. So I just really find all these people influential, and others. When I talk about people and cultures that have influenced me, again, I won't give you every single one. I'll be here all day. But these are the sort of oddballs that I talked about. I come from this blue-collar family with like freethinker grandparents, very like hippie-ish mother, a redneck dad, but the nice kind of redneck, the socially accepting, not racist kind of redneck, etc. Obviously, the woman sitting next to me, Hazel, has been a massive influence on me as well, just teaching me a lot about loyalty and growth. On the negative side of things, I put up a picture of my brother and a friend, and the friend is no longer with us. He took his own life last year. My brother attempted to take his own life 4 or 5 years ago, and I could list many more. So I came through a really difficult little mill town called Malala, and just happened to be with a group of people who were all smoking weed and drinking, and I was more or less forced into that against my will at age 13. And so a lot of those kids progress into heroin and meth and all sorts of things. So that's been very hard to come out of, and to see people literally not make it all around me. It's also hard to disentangle myself from like the more self-destructive sides of masculinity I was raised with, that we don't complain, we don't get help, we just keep working, etc. That's a really silly way to live. So I've had to kind of undo some of that wiring, and that's a work in progress. The reason I put that poetry on there is to remind myself that I actually have accomplishments, because another thing that this left me with was sort of a lifelong feeling that I was not good enough. Having been around that set and been excluded and looked down upon by teachers and authority figures as being a weird little stoner kid, or by other people in that community for, whatever reason. So kind of have to remind myself where I came from and that I'm not there anymore. So to kind of sum those up, the lessons I've learned there from literature, which has really been my lifeline through all of that crazy stuff, at least before I met Hazel. Absurdism, just stop trying to worry about what is right or what is wrong or what you can control. Figure out what feels right and wrong in your own life. And this isn't some moral relativism thing. I have strong morals and a strong moral compass, but like absurdism kind of absolves you from the need for perfectionism and allows you to grieve in very interesting ways. So it's just been a really useful thing. But I've really just been able to always pick up a book or go to the library and search for guidance. And that's been a wonderful thing. I, at an early age, got into motocross, snowboarding, all these kind of countercultural sports, and those have been a big influence too. They taught me confidence. It's very hard to feel insecure when you're hitting like a 70-foot jump on a motorcycle. They taught me free expression because there's no perfect rule book about how to do those things. From my wife, I've really learned a ton about loyalty just because we have been through so much together. And I've learned that a relationship is about finding someone to grow with, really. And that's been a huge lesson rather than just enabling each other and like staying stagnant, which is what I used to think love was. It's more about growth together. From my brother, I really took these lessons about moderation and kindness and basically determination. I mean, a lot of the addiction issues I saw were rooted in mental illness from people who needed help and didn't get it. Like I said, depressives and bipolar disorder and all kinds of things. So it was like, be mindful of where you're at, know your own head, know yourself. And also, even if things get bad, you don't just quit. You don't just turn to substances, because I've seen too many people do that. Okay, I'm going to try to speed this up because I'm taking forever. So I'm not going to read all these little snatches of poetry, but that's more poetry to just remind myself like, oh yeah, I like to be able to write and I like to share that stuff. And I have confidence in that. Like it's an ongoing project for me. So Stoic absurdism basically means don't worry about the things that you cannot control. That's the Stoicism piece, the old school Marcus Aurelius kind. And the absurdism piece of basically embracing the chaos of living, looking at the gratitude of having been born, realizing bad things will happen, tragedy comes for all of us, but that doesn't take away from the present moment. So, right on to love and loyalty through life. Really, this is just from Hazel more than anything else, and my parents, who've been really wonderful supporters my whole life too. If I connect with somebody and get to know them and trust them, then I want to maintain that for the rest of my life. I want to show people with that Kurt Vonnegut kind of kindness, like no matter what befalls you, no matter what happens, we keep that bond, because it seems like that's kind of the point of all this. You want to go through all these things together. Mature freedom means really trying to separate myself from that wildness I grew up in and sort of evolve into a person who's making long-term choices, setting goals and accomplishing them. Realize that there's a kind of freedom that is choosing what you want to grow into, choosing how to challenge yourself, and then kind of looking back at that compared to the juvenile freedom where I was just a wild, crazy kid. Just owning my age, I guess. All right, things I stand for: kindness, fairness, freedom, philosophy, safety, loyalty. Feel like I've kind of covered these more or less. Philosophy, maybe not so much, but that is the whole know yourself bit. Just, yeah. Okay, on the next slides, finish those out. Things I need to keep working on developing. Courage is about being a good dad. Self-discipline is kind of about being a good dad and teacher as well. Creativity is actually about seeing path through life less than it is about writing or doing music or painting or something like that. And lateral thinking, I think our culture is really prescriptive in the lifestyles that it has for us, the acceptable ways to live. I don't think that one has to necessarily buy into and follow those ways. So I think it's going to take continued work. And Hazel and I have all these projects about moving out to the country and having some more freedom and getting some land and things like that. All right. So some things that I'm trying to do to help others. I'm trying to break cycles for my kids. My parents were wonderful. Also, there was very few nights where I don't remember them drinking, for instance, things like that. Not a criticism of them, great parents. It's more about breaking cycles of the addiction and stuff that my brother brought in. So trying to make sure my kids have an extremely safe place to live and prioritize their health and wellness. As a citizen, I really think it's important to teach well at this moment. I see a lot of pretty serious problems that guys like Ray Bradbury and Carl Sagan and many others have forecast as being consequences of disinformation and excess entertainment and all the other things going on. So it's like now more than ever, if I'm going to keep being a teacher, I need to really lean into it and never be phoning it in. Lastly, as a citizen, I really want to get back to this. This is a snowboard club that Hazel, myself, and the guy in the green jacket there, Tucker, started at our last school. These sports did so much for me to enable me to get out of the bad situations I was in and build confidence. So I want to restart some of these outdoor clubs. We used to run this at my first school, and we had like 30 members. So we basically shut down the wrestling team because all the wrestlers became snowboarders, which was a bit of a controversy. I want to do that again. I want to find a way to get kids involved in the outdoors. So yeah, some days I feel like that kid in the black there, that's myself, my brother, and my dad, growing up in this kind of chaotic environment with all these people who are addicted to things and feeling like I wasn't good enough because I was a part of that, feeling like a bit of an outsider, outlier at all times. So I'm really trying to remind myself, if I want to be the best version of myself, I have to keep thinking like, hey, you're doing okay. You're here for these kids. You're building this good relationship with your wife. You're breaking these cycles. So that's how I wanted to end this, just saying like part of my creed is standing on my identity now and being open to other people, especially the students I teach, many of whom are going through very similar things, so that they know like, oh, you don't have to keep going down this road. I didn't. You don't have to either. There's ways out. And that's that.
Wow. Awesome.